My name is Callie and I'm 25. The bank took my parents' house yesterday while I stood in my own kitchen, staring at a lake view I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford. We have nowhere to go. Mom sobbed into the phone, her voice cracking on each word. The foreclosure happened so fast. We lost everything, honey. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt guilty for having more than your family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. 4 months earlier, I'd been standing in this same kitchen, champagne in hand, celebrating the closing on my dream house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and that $1 million view of Lake Tahoe. The real estate agent had called it perfect for entertaining and a growing family. She wasn't wrong. I was engaged to Marcus, planning our wedding, dreaming of children who'd grow up swimming in that crystal-clear water. But dreams have a way of shifting when family crisis hits. Dad had lost his construction management job, right when Mom's cancer diagnosis came through. The double blow demolished their finances faster than a wrecking ball. Medical bills stacked up like dominoes, and the bank had zero patience for late mortgage payments. Just temporarily, Dad assured me when I offered them my spare rooms. His pride was wounded, but not broken. Until we get back on our feet. Maybe rent a small apartment closer to town. I was radiating happiness, practically bouncing as I showed them around. Take the master guest room, it has the best morning light. Mom needs that for her recovery. And Dad, you can use the 3rd bedroom as an office while you job hunt. Mom cried when she saw the room. But these were good tears. Relief tears. You're saving our lives, sweetheart. We'll pay you back every penny once things turn around. Marcus wrapped his arm around my waist as we watched my parents explore their temporary sanctuary. You're amazing, he whispered. But remember, this is just until they get settled elsewhere. We need our space for married life. I nodded eagerly. Of course this was temporary. This was my rescue mission, not a permanent housing solution. My parents had always been independent, proud people. They'd hate imposing on their daughter longer than absolutely necessary. The first week felt like a sleepover. Mom cooked elaborate dinners to show her gratitude. Dad fixed the squeaky hinge on my front door and organized my garage. My younger brothers, Jake and Ryan, 16 and 17, were thrilled to be living so close to the lake. They helped carry boxes, mowed my lawn without being asked, and Ryan even offered to help with wedding planning. This is what family does, Mom said, squeezing my hand over dinner. We take care of each other. I felt like a superhero, swooping in to save the day with my perfect timing and perfect house. But here's what I didn't realize yet. Sometimes the people you rescue don't actually want to be saved. Sometimes they just want a more comfortable place to land. The bills started arriving in my mailbox during week 3. Not unusual amounts at first. An extra 100 here and there for groceries, utilities creeping upward with 4 additional people showering and doing laundry. Normal adjustments for a temporarily larger household. What wasn't normal was Dad's sudden interest in my basement. This space is wasted, he announced one Saturday morning, standing in my unfinished basement with a measuring tape. I could set up a proper workshop down here. Maybe get back into furniture restoration while I'm looking for construction work. Before I could process his request, he'd already started sketching plans on the back of an envelope. It would only be temporary, Mom added quickly, reading my hesitation. Just until we find our own place. And he'd pay for any modifications, of course. Of course they would. Except Dad was unemployed and Mom was on disability. Where exactly would this payment money come from? But I was still operating under the delusion that this arrangement had an expiration date. Sure, I said. Just keep it simple. Nothing permanent. Within a week, Dad had transformed my basement into a professional-grade workshop. Not simple modifications, permanent ones, industrial lighting, ventilation systems, workbenches bolted to the concrete floor. He'd somehow acquired thousands of dollars worth of equipment while supposedly being broke. Where did all this come from? I asked, running my hand along a beautiful new router table. Your Uncle Frank was getting rid of equipment, Dad said, not meeting my eyes. Lucky timing. Right. Lucky timing seemed to follow my parents everywhere these days. Jake and Ryan had enrolled in the local high school, just until we move. Their friends started hanging out at my house every afternoon, treating my kitchen like a snack bar and my living room like their personal gaming lounge. Boys will be boys, Mom laughed when I mentioned the noise levels. At least they're not on the streets getting into trouble. Meanwhile, my own routines were disappearing. I couldn't work late anymore because the boys stayed up until midnight playing video games in the living room. I couldn't have friends over without my parents inserting themselves into every conversation. I couldn't walk from my bedroom to the kitchen in my pajamas without considering whether I was appropriately dressed for family breakfast. My house was becoming their house, one small invasion at a time. Marcus noticed the change immediately. "This isn't working," he said during one of our increasingly rare date nights. "I can't even kiss you properly in your own kitchen without your mother asking if we want coffee." "It's temporary," I insisted, the phrase becoming my daily mantra. "They'll find their own place soon." He raised an eyebrow. "When?" "Your dad seems pretty settled in that basement kingdom he's built." I wanted to defend my family, but the words felt hollow. Dad did seem remarkably comfortable for someone who was supposedly desperate to move out, and Mom had started rearranging my furniture to create better conversation areas. That night, I found myself calculating expenses on my laptop. Groceries had tripled. The utility bills were approaching ridiculous levels. I was working overtime to cover costs that hadn't existed 4 weeks ago. But family helps family, right? This was just temporary sacrifice for the people I loved most. I closed the laptop and tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach telling me that temporary was beginning to look awfully permanent. 2 months in, and my beautiful lake house felt like a boarding house where I was the only one paying rent. Mom's temporary furniture started appearing piece by piece. A curio cabinet in my dining room to display her china collection. Her favorite armchair positioned by my fireplace, because the light is so much better here than in the bedroom. Dad's recliner appeared in my living room because his back needs proper support after workshop time. "Why, where exactly is all this furniture coming from?" I asked as Jake and Ryan carried in yet another box marked Mom's books. "Storage unit," Mom said, directing them toward my built-in shelves. "We couldn't bear to sell everything. Too many memories." Storage unit. They were paying monthly fees for a storage unit while claiming to be financially devastated. The math wasn't adding up, but questioning it felt cruel while Mom was still recovering from chemo. The breaking point came during my dress fitting. I was standing on the pedestal at the bridal salon, watching the seamstress pin my hem, when Mom launched into her latest financial crisis. "The insurance company denied another claim," she sighed, dabbing her eyes with tissue. "We owe the oncologist $8,000 by next month or they'll send it to collections." My reflection in the three-way mirror showed a bride-to-be, but all I could see was the exhausted woman working 12-hour days to keep everyone else afloat. "Maybe I can pick up more freelance projects," I heard myself saying. The seamstress glanced up. "Sweetie, you're getting married in 4 months. When are you planning this extra work? Between dress fittings and vendor meetings?" Good question. When was I planning anything wedding-related? Every evening was consumed with family dinners, family discussions, family needs. Marcus and I hadn't had a private conversation about our ceremony in weeks. "The wedding isn't going anywhere," Mom said dismissively. "Health comes first. Family comes first." Right, family first, which apparently meant my wedding came last. That evening, Marcus found me crying over wedding vendor contracts on my laptop. "What's wrong now?" He sat beside me on the couch but kept his voice low. My parents were watching television 10 feet away in what used to be our intimate living space. "I need to postpone the tasting at the country club, and maybe cancel the honeymoon deposit. Mom needs—" "Stop!" His voice was firmer than I'd ever heard it. "Callie, look at me." I turned away from the laptop screen. "This has to stop. Your family is consuming everything. Your time, your money, your energy, your happiness. And now they want your wedding too? It's just a postponement. We can reschedule." "Can we?" He gestured around my living room, now dominated by my father's recliner and my mother's collection of ceramic figurines. "Because it looks to me like they're settling in for the long haul. When's the last time anyone mentioned finding their own apartment?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. The conversations about temporary housing had simply stopped. "They need help," I whispered. "They need boundaries," Marcus corrected. "And we need our life back." From the kitchen came the sound of Jake raiding my refrigerator and Ryan turning up his music. My parents' voices drifted over from the TV area, planning Jake's upcoming birthday party. In my house, without consulting me. Marcus was right. But what was I supposed to do? Throw my sick mother and unemployed father onto the street? 6 months, I said finally. "Give me 6 months to figure this out." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. 6 months to figure out what, exactly? I didn't have an answer. Month 4 arrived with spring weather and my parents' declaration that they'd settled into a routine. Routine was an interesting word choice. What they'd actually done was divide up my house like we were college roommates, except college roommates split the bills. Dad controlled the basement and garage, where he'd started a small furniture repair business using my address. Customers dropping off antique chairs and damaged dressers at all hours. He proudly showed me the business cards he'd printed. Frank's Restoration, quality craftsmanship since 1985. No mention that this business was operating out of his daughter's home without her permission. It's bringing in some money, he beamed, showing me a handful of 20s. Maybe $50 last week. Every little bit helps, right? $50. While I was covering his family's grocery bills that easily topped 300 weekly. Mom had transformed my kitchen into her domain. My carefully organized spice rack was replaced with her collection of bulk seasonings from some discount warehouse. My minimalist countertops now hosted her bread maker, dehydrator, and a collection of ceramic canisters that add personality. You young people don't know how to make a house feel like a home, she said, arranging yet another doily under yet another decorative bowl. A house needs warmth, character. My house had plenty of character before she decided it needed her special touch. The boys had claimed the family room as their headquarters. Ryan's Xbox was permanently connected to my television. Jake's guitar amp lived in the corner, and their school backpacks were dumped by my front door every afternoon like they owned the place. Which apparently, they did now. We should talk about chores, I mentioned during dinner one night, trying to sound casual. Everyone living here should help maintain the house. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me like I'd suggested we sacrifice a goat. Sweetheart, Mom said carefully, your father and I are dealing with some serious health and employment issues. Adding stress about housework doesn't seem fair. And Jake and Ryan have school and sports, Dad added. Their education has to come first. Right. Everyone's priorities came before basic household responsibilities. How silly of me to expect the people eating my food and using my utilities to occasionally load a dishwasher. Marcus stopped coming over entirely. I feel like a stranger in your house, he explained over dinner at a restaurant downtown. Your family looks at me like I'm intruding on their space. Your space. I wanted to argue, but I'd seen the looks. The way Dad changed the television channel when Marcus tried to watch sports. The way Mom dominated conversations during dinner, never asking Marcus about his work or interests. The way Jake and Ryan treated him like an annoying older brother instead of their sister's fiancé. After we're married, it'll be different, I said. We'll have boundaries then. Marcus set down his fork. Down. Callie, honey, listen to yourself. After we're married? They're not planning to leave after your wedding. They're planning to stay through your wedding. What do you mean? I mean, they've never once mentioned looking at apartments. Never once talked about their move-out timeline. Never once discussed how this living arrangement affects our relationship. My stomach clenched, because he was absolutely right. Your mom asked me yesterday if we'd consider postponing our honeymoon because she might need help recovering from a dental procedure. The breadstick in my hand crumbled, and, she what? A dental procedure, Callie, not emergency surgery, not a cancer relapse. Routine dental work that apparently requires her daughter to cancel her honeymoon. I sat in that restaurant booth, watching my fiancé's patience finally reach its breaking point and realized something terrifying. My family wasn't temporarily staying in my house. I was permanently trapped in theirs. Wedding planning became a solo endeavor while my family transformed my home into their permanent headquarters. I'd sneak out during lunch breaks to meet with florists and photographers, making decisions alone that should have involved my fiancé. But Marcus had reached his limit of family-dominated evenings and awkward dinner conversations, where my parents treated him like a visitor instead of the man I was marrying. You know, Mom mentioned one morning while I was rushing to get ready for work, you're spending an awful lot of money on this wedding when we have real financial pressures. I paused, mascara wand halfway to my lashes. What do you mean? $8,000 for a photographer? That seems excessive when your father still owes money to contractors from his business. His business? The furniture restoration operation he was running out of my basement while contributing $0 to household expenses. The photographer is important to me, I said carefully. I want professional wedding photos. Mom sighed, rearranging the pill organizer she kept on my kitchen counter. I just think priorities matter, sweetie. Family needs versus wedding wants. Right. My wedding was a want, but Dad's workshop equipment had been a need. That afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. Miss Thompson. The voice was crisp, professional. This is Janet from Mountain View Oncology. We need to discuss your mother's outstanding balance. My blood pressure spiked. Is she okay? Did something happen? She's medically fine, but we show an outstanding balance of $12,000 for her treatment. The insurance covered most costs, but the patient responsibility portion is past due. $12,000, not the $8,000 Mom had mentioned. And she'd said they owed the oncologist, but this was a different medical group entirely. Can you hold, please? I asked, my hand trembling as I put the phone down. I pulled up my online banking and started calculating. Over the past 4 months, I'd been covering groceries, utilities, household supplies, and random family emergencies. The numbers were staggering. nearly $15,000 beyond my normal monthly expenses. But my parents were receiving disability payments and unemployment benefits. Where was that money going? Miss Thompson? Janet's voice was patient but firm when I picked up again. Will you be able to make a payment today? Let me call you back. That evening, I attempted the most uncomfortable conversation of my adult life. We need to talk about finances, I announced during dinner. I need to understand where everyone's money is going. The table went silent. Forks suspended halfway to mouths, chewing stopped. Even Jake's constant foot tapping paused. That's a very personal question, Dad said finally. I think I've earned the right to ask personal questions, I replied, surprising myself with my directness. I've been covering household expenses for 4 months while everyone else's income remains a mystery. Your father's unemployment barely covers his medications, Mom said, her voice taking on that wounded tone that usually made me backtrack immediately. Not this time. What about your disability payments? What about the boys' jobs? Both Jake and Ryan worked part-time at local businesses. Those are for their personal expenses, Dad answered. Clothes, gas money, dating. Teenage boys have needs. Teenage boys have needs, but apparently engaged daughters have unlimited bank accounts. I can't cover the medical bills, I said finally. Not if I want to have any kind of wedding. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad's face darkened with disappointment. Jake and Ryan shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their plates. After everything we've been through, Mom whispered, you're choosing a party over your family's health. A party. My wedding was a party in her mind. It's not choosing, I protested, already feeling myself weakening under their collective disappointment. It's just, I need some limits. But the damage was done. The rest of dinner was conducted in wounded silence while I sat there feeling like the most selfish daughter in the world. Later that night, I found myself researching personal loans and credit card cash advances. Maybe I could find the money somewhere. Maybe I could make this work without choosing between my family and my future. Maybe I was the problem. 3 weeks before my wedding, everything fell apart with a single phone call I was never supposed to hear. I was working late at the office, trying to catch up on projects I'd been neglecting while managing family crises. Around 7 p.m., I realized I'd forgotten to ask what Mom wanted for dinner, so I called the house. Dad answered on the second ring. Hello? Hey, Dad, it's me. What should I pick up for dinner on my way home? Steaks would be good. Get those ribeyes from that fancy market you like. Fancy ribeyes. For the family that couldn't afford their medical bills. Okay, I'll grab some vegetables too. See you. Hang on. Dad's voice became muffled as he turned away from the phone. I heard him talking to someone in the background, his voice carrying that tone people use when they think they're private. What I heard next stopped my world entirely. She's a burden on our lives. Dad's voice came through crystal clear. He thought he'd hung up, but the call was still connected. Working all those hours, always stressed, always asking questions about money. I wish she would just disappear. Mom's voice joined in. Move away or something. We were doing fine before she started playing savior. My hand started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. The house is perfect, though, Dad continued. Best thing that ever happened to us was that foreclosure. Got us upgraded living for free. And she's so guilty about everything, she won't even fight back when we ask for money. It's like having a personal ATM that cooks dinner. They were laughing. Actually laughing about how easily they'd manipulated me. Think she'll go through with the wedding? Mom asked. Doesn't matter, Dad replied. Marcus will move in here too, or she'll break up with him. Either way, we keep the house situation. I hung up so hard my desk lamp rattled. For 10 minutes, I sat in my office chair, staring at nothing, feeling everything I'd believed about my family crumble like a demolished building. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a resource to be exploited. They weren't grateful for my help. They thought they deserved it. They didn't love me. They loved what I provided. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How was your day? Miss you. I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus, who'd been begging me to see what I'd been too guilty to acknowledge. Marcus, who'd watched me destroy my own happiness to please people who viewed my kindness as weakness. I typed back, Can you meet me? We need to talk. Important. An hour later, we sat in his truck outside my office building while I told him everything I'd overheard. His face went through a dozen expressions. Anger, sadness, relief, determination. I'm so sorry, he said finally, pulling me against his chest. But I'm also not surprised. What do I do? I whispered into his shirt, breathing in his familiar scent for the first time in weeks without feeling rushed or guilty. Remember that job offer I got in Colorado? His voice was gentle but excited. The construction management position in Denver? I pulled back to look at him. The one you turned down because of my situation? They called yesterday. Position still available. Better salary, company housing assistance, fresh start. He cupped my face in his hands. Come with me, Callie. Let's get married and build our own life somewhere they can't touch it. For the first time in months, I could actually see a future that belonged to me. What about the house? Sell it. Take the money and run. Sell it. The idea was so simple, so obvious. I wondered why it had never occurred to me before. Because I'd been raised to believe that family mattered more than my own happiness. That sacrifice was noble and boundaries were selfish. But sitting in Marcus's truck, still hearing my parents' cruel laughter in my memory, I finally understood the difference between love and exploitation. Let's do it, I said, and meant it completely. This time tomorrow, my real life would finally begin. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While my family slept in their claimed territories throughout my house, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started researching Denver real estate agents. If I was going to disappear, I needed to do it right. I called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and drove to the most expensive real estate office in town. The kind of place that handled million-dollar lake properties for people who knew how to keep their mouths shut. I need to sell quickly and quietly, I told Rebecca Martinez, a sharp-eyed agent who didn't blink when I explained my timeline requirements. The current occupants can't know it's on the market. Difficult family situation? She asked with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen everything. You could say that. Rebecca nodded. We can list it as by appointment only and schedule showings when they're out. With a property this nice and the current market, we should have offers within days. That afternoon, while Dad was in his basement kingdom and Mom was at her weekly doctor's appointment, I signed the listing agreement. Rebecca took professional photos of my beautiful home, carefully editing out all traces of my family's invasion. The listing went live at midnight with a price that would guarantee quick action. What do you think it's worth? Marcus asked over dinner at a restaurant across town, far from any place my family might randomly appear. Enough for a house in Denver and a wedding that's actually ours. I felt lighter than I had in months, like someone had finally untied the anchor dragging me underwater. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Where are you? Mom made your favorite pasta. My favorite pasta. The one I'd specifically asked her to stop making because it reminded me of my ex-boyfriend from college, but she kept preparing it because she liked it. Coming home, I texted back, though home was starting to feel like a foreign concept. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd worked overtime for months to support a family that saw me as their personal bank account, while secretly planning to escape with the very house money they thought belonged to them too. When I walked through my front door that evening, the scene was perfectly staged. Dad emerged from his workshop with sawdust in his hair, playing the part of the hard-working patriarch. Mom bustled around the kitchen, the devoted wife managing everyone's dinner. Jake and Ryan were doing homework at my dining table, the responsible students focused on their education. All of it funded by me. All of it performed for my benefit. There's my working girl, Dad said, clapping me on the shoulder. Long day building that nest egg? Building that nest egg? If only he knew how right he was. Rebecca Martinez called today, I said casually while helping Mom set the table. Something about property assessments in the neighborhood. Did anyone talk to a real estate agent? Mom frowned. No, why would we? We're not going anywhere anytime soon. This arrangement is working perfectly for everyone. Working perfectly for everyone. That was certainly one way to describe financial parasitism. During dinner, they chatted about their weekend plans with an enthusiasm that made my blood pressure spike. Jake's birthday is coming up, Mom announced. We're thinking of taking the boys skiing up at North Star. Make it a long weekend celebration. Skiing? I set down my fork. That's expensive. Oh, we found a great deal, Dad said quickly. Package includes lift tickets and equipment rental. Sometimes you have to invest in family memories. Right. The family that owed $12,000 in medical bills had found money for a luxury ski weekend. The same family that needed me to cover grocery bills was planning a mountain resort vacation. How much is this great deal? I asked. Don't worry about it, sweetie. Mom patted my hand. We've been saving up. Besides, the boys work so hard in school. They deserve some fun. They deserve some fun, but I deserve to fund their lifestyle indefinitely. When are you planning to go? The question came out sharper than intended. This weekend, Ryan said excitedly. 3 days of perfect powder, according to the weather report. This weekend. While I'd been planning my escape, they'd been planning their getaway. The timing was almost too perfect to believe. After dinner, I retreated to my bedroom and called Rebecca. Any interest yet? I asked, though the listing had only been live for 6 hours. 3 showings scheduled for tomorrow, 2 more on Saturday. One buyer is flying in from San Francisco specifically to see it. Cash offer potential. Can you schedule them all for this weekend? The occupants will be out of town. Perfect. I'll make it happen. As I hung up, I heard Jake and Ryan arguing about snowboard versus ski rentals in the living room below. The casual way they discussed expense details for a trip they supposedly couldn't afford would have been impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. That night, I lay in bed listening to my family plan their vacation with money they claimed not to have, while I planned my liberation with money they'd assumed would always be available. Sometimes justice has a sense of humor. Friday morning arrived with Mom bustling around my kitchen, packing snacks for their ski trip like she was organizing a military operation. I made extra sandwiches in case you get hungry while we're gone, she called out, stuffing a cooler with enough food to feed a small army. There's leftover casserole in the fridge, and I picked up that ice cream you like. Taking care of me. How thoughtful of someone who'd called me a burden 3 days ago. Have fun, I said, watching Dad load their luggage into the car I'd been making payments on. Drive safely. We'll miss you, honey. Mom hugged me tight, and for a split second, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning. Almost. Then Jake emerged from the house wearing brand new ski gear that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and the guilt evaporated entirely. Sweet jacket, I commented. Yeah. When did you get that? Yesterday, he grinned. Dad said I needed proper gear for the mountain. Can't have me looking like a beginner up there. Can't have him looking like a beginner. But they could have me looking like an idiot for believing their sob stories about financial hardship. I waved goodbye from my front porch as they drove away in their packed car, heading for a weekend that would cost more than most people's monthly rent. The same people who'd been crying poverty for 4 months while I worked overtime to keep them comfortable. The irony was delicious. While they were enjoying their luxury vacation, I'd be conducting the business transaction that would finally free me from their manipulation. Rebecca called 30 minutes later. The San Francisco buyer wants to see it at noon, she said. Can I bring him by? Perfect timing. I spent the morning erasing evidence of my family's occupation, packed away Mom's doilies and ceramic collections, stored Dad's scattered business papers, cleared Jake and Ryan's gaming equipment from the living room. For the first time in months, my house looked like mine again. The buyer was exactly what Rebecca had promised. Serious, qualified, and holding a pre-approval letter that made my realtor's eyes light up like Christmas morning. The lake access is private? He asked, standing on my deck overlooking the crystal-clear water. Completely private. Your own sandy beach. Perfect for kids or just peaceful mornings. He walked through each room, taking notes, asking intelligent questions about systems and maintenance. In the basement, he paused at Dad's elaborate workshop setup. This is impressive. Does the equipment convey with the property? I thought about Dad's pride in his tools, his business cards with my address, his assumption that he could operate indefinitely out of my basement. No, I said. The current occupant will be removing all personal items. By 3 p.m., I was signing a purchase agreement for $20,000 over my asking price, with a cash close in 18 days. The buyer wanted the house for his growing family, kids who would actually belong there instead of treating it like a free hotel. Congratulations, Rebecca said, shaking my hand. You just made the fastest sale I've handled this year. I thought I'd feel elated, but instead I felt hollow. Relief mixed with sadness, mixed with anticipation of the storm that was coming. That evening, I called Marcus with the news. $950,000, I said, still not quite believing the number. Holy shit, Callie. That's enough for a house in Denver and a wedding and a honeymoon and probably a car, too. And student loan payoff and an emergency fund and maybe even a down payment on that photography studio I've always wanted to open. For the first time in months, I was making plans that had nothing to do with other people's needs and everything to do with my own dreams. When do they get back from skiing? Marcus asked. Sunday night. I'll tell them Monday morning. You sure you want to do it face to face? After what you heard them say? I'd been debating that question all week. Part of me wanted the confrontation, wanted to see their faces when they realized their golden goose had flown the coop, but a bigger part of me was just exhausted from months of manipulation and guilt trips. Maybe not, I said finally. Maybe they don't deserve an explanation. They definitely don't deserve an explanation. Sunday evening, I watched them return from their vacation, laughing and sunburned, carrying shopping bags full of resort souvenirs. Jake was sporting expensive sunglasses, Ryan had a new hoodie with the North Star logo, and my parents looked more relaxed than I'd seen them since before Dad lost his job. Funny how a weekend of luxury skiing could cure financial stress so effectively. How was your weekend, sweetie? Mom asked, hugging me while still wearing her designer ski jacket. Did you miss us? It was very productive, I said truthfully. I got a lot accomplished. Good for you, Dad said, already heading toward his basement workshop. Back to the grind tomorrow. Back to the grind. If only he knew that tomorrow would bring a very different kind of grinding. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to make a difficult decision about toxic family members. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the second time in a week. My family had already settled back into their comfortable routines. Dad in his workshop, Mom rearranging my kitchen to suit her preferences, Jake and Ryan getting ready for school in the bedrooms they'd claimed as their own. While they lived their lives in my house, I was about to reclaim my life entirely. The moving truck arrived at 8 a.m., just after Jake and Ryan left for school. I'd hired professionals and paid extra for speed and discretion. 3 hours to pack everything that mattered and load it into the truck heading for Denver. My clothes, my personal photos, my grandmother's jewelry, the few pieces of furniture that held real meaning. I left behind everything my family had infiltrated. The kitchen appliances Mom had replaced with her versions, the living room furniture Dad had rearranged for better television viewing, the expensive linens I'd bought that were now permanently stained with their lives. They could keep it all. In 18 days, it would be someone else's problem. The hardest part was listening to them go about their morning routines, while I systematically erased myself from the house. Mom humming in the kitchen as she made Dad's coffee. Dad's power tools humming in the basement as he worked on some client's project. The comfortable sounds of people who felt completely secure in their surroundings. By 11 a.m., the truck was loaded and pulling away from my lake house for the last time. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the home I'd dreamed of for years, saved for, worked overtime to afford. It was beautiful. Perfect. Everything I'd wanted when I'd signed those mortgage papers 8 months ago. But it had never really been mine. Not once my family decided it belonged to them too. I pulled out the envelope I'd prepared and walked to the front door one last time. The letter inside was brief, direct, and probably the most honest thing I'd ever written to my parents. Your wish has come true. The house has been sold, and your burden is leaving your lives. You have 20 days to vacate the property and find your own housing. Don't try to contact me. I slipped the envelope under the door, got back in my car, and drove toward the highway that would take me to my new life. 3 hours later, I was crossing into Nevada when my phone started ringing. Mom's number. I watched it go to voicemail, then ring again immediately. Dad's number this time. Then Mom again. Then the house phone. Then Jake's cell. Then Ryan's cell. Then Mom again. By the time I stopped for gas in Reno, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemail messages. I listened to the first one. Callie, honey, there's been some mistake. Mom's voice was shaky, confused. We came home and found this crazy letter about selling the house. Someone's playing a terrible joke. Call us back immediately. I deleted it without listening to the rest. The next message was Dad, his voice sharp with authority. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. Get back here and explain what this letter means. You can't sell a house with occupants. That's illegal. Actually, Dad, it's completely legal when the occupants aren't on the deed and have no lease agreement. But thanks for playing. I blocked all their numbers and continued driving. Marcus was waiting for me at our hotel in Denver, champagne chilling and takeout containers from my new favorite restaurant spread across the small table. How do you feel? He asked, wrapping his arms around me as I collapsed into his chest. Free, I said, and meant it completely. Terrified, but free. Any regrets? I thought about Jake's new ski jacket, Ryan's casual attitude about expensive equipment, Mom's designer resort wear, Dad's fully equipped workshop. I thought about months of working overtime while they lived comfortably on my dime. I thought about their laughter when they called me a burden they wished would disappear. Not one. My phone buzzed with notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and email as they found other ways to contact me. I turned it off completely. Tomorrow, we start looking at houses, Marcus said, refilling my champagne glass. Our house, our rules, our life. Our mortgage payment that we split equally, I added with a grin. Our grocery bills that we budget together. Our utility costs that we monitor responsibly. Our furniture that stays where we put it. We toasted to our future, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was drinking to celebrate my own life instead of drowning my frustrations. That night, I slept better than I had in months, knowing I was 500 miles away from people who saw my love as weakness and my kindness as an invitation to take advantage. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, and this time I was writing it myself. The voicemails kept coming for 3 days, even though I'd blocked their primary numbers. Somehow they found ways to reach me. probably using friends' phones, workplace numbers, even what sounded like a payphone in one desperately scratchy message. I didn't listen to most of them, but the few I accidentally heard told the whole story. Day 1. Confusion and disbelief. This has to be a mistake. Callie would never do something this cruel. Day 2. Anger and threats. We'll contest this sale. You can't abandon your family. We'll sue you for everything. Day 3. Bargaining and manipulation. We know you're hurt, but we can work this out. Come home and we'll discuss reasonable boundaries. Reasonable boundaries. That was rich coming from people who'd turned my home into their personal kingdom without asking permission. But the message that finally made me laugh out loud came from Jake on Thursday morning. Callie, this isn't fair. We're basically homeless now. How are we supposed to find a place to live in 20 days? And I have finals coming up. You're ruining my education. Your education, Jake, that I'd been subsidizing while you spent your job money on ski equipment and video games. The education that was supposedly so important, my wedding had to take a backseat to your family's financial needs. Marcus found me deleting voicemails while drinking coffee in our hotel room. Still coming? He asked, sitting beside me on the bed. 23 new messages since yesterday. They're getting creative with the guilt trips now. What's the latest strategy? Apparently, I'm single-handedly destroying Jake's academic future and Ryan's sports opportunities. Also, Mom might have a stress-induced heart attack, and Dad's unemployment benefits are being delayed due to bureaucratic complications. The greatest hits collection. The best part is they're staying in my house while sending these messages. Eating food from my refrigerator, using utilities I'm still paying for until closing, sleeping in beds I bought, and somehow I'm the villain in this story. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize with a local area code from back home. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? Callie? Thank God. It's Susan from next door. My neighbor. They were recruiting my neighbors now. Susan, I'm sorry they dragged you into this. Honey, are you okay? Your parents are telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown. They're saying you disappeared without warning and left them homeless. I closed my eyes. Of course they were playing the victim card to the neighborhood. Susan, I'm fine. And they're not homeless. They have 20 days to find their own place, which is more notice than most people get. But they said, your father mentioned they were helping you with mortgage payments? The lies were spreading faster than wildfire. Susan, I've been supporting 4 adults for months while they lived in my house rent-free. They never paid a dime toward my mortgage. Silence on the other end. I have to ask, Susan said carefully, because your mother was crying pretty hard. Is it true you sold the house without telling them? I sold my house, yes. The house I own, that I pay for, that has only my name on the deed. Oh, another pause. She made it sound like you were all living there together as a family arrangement. We were, until I found out they saw me as a burden they wished would disappear. Jesus, Callie, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. After I hung up, I realized this was probably happening all over my old neighborhood. My parents were telling anyone who'd listen that their poor, unstable daughter had cruelly abandoned her loving family. The narrative would stick too. People love a good victim story, especially when it involves ungrateful children and suffering parents. But for the first time in months, I didn't care what people thought. The people whose opinions mattered, Marcus, my real friends, my coworkers who'd watched me struggle, they knew the truth. You know what the crazy part is? I told Marcus as we drove around Denver looking at potential neighborhoods. I actually feel guilty. Like maybe I should have given them more warning, more time to adjust. Callie, they had 4 months to adjust. 4 months to look for their own place, to contribute to expenses, to treat you like family instead of a resource. They chose not to. I know that logically. And emotionally, I feel like the worst daughter in the world. That's because they trained you to feel that way. Every time you set a boundary, they made you feel selfish. Every time you asked for respect, they made you feel unreasonable. That programming doesn't disappear overnight. He was right. I'd been conditioned to believe that good daughters sacrifice everything for family harmony. That love meant never saying no, never prioritizing my own needs, never expecting reciprocity. But sitting in that car, looking at houses where Marcus and I might build our actual life together, I realized something important. Real love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Real family doesn't see your kindness as weakness to exploit. And real parents don't call their daughter a burden behind her back while smiling to her face. I was done feeling guilty for refusing to be their personal ATM with feelings. 6 weeks later, I was standing in the kitchen of our new house in Denver, wearing my wedding dress and watching Marcus adjust his tie in the reflection of our microwave. "Ready, Mrs. Coleman?" he asked, grinning at my reflection. "Ready, Mr. Coleman." We'd gotten married at the courthouse that morning with 2 witnesses Marcus recruited from his new job site. No family drama, no financial stress, no guilt trips about wedding expenses. Just 2 people who loved each other making it official in front of a judge who probably performed a dozen ceremonies that day. It was perfect. The house was perfect too. 3 bedrooms in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard big enough for the dog we were planning to adopt and the kids we hoped to have someday. Most importantly, the mortgage payment was something we could afford together, without either of us working overtime or sacrificing our dreams. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked for the 100th time since we'd signed the papers. "About the wedding? The house? Or the family situation?" "All of it." I looked around our kitchen. Our dishes in our cabinets, our coffee maker on our counter, our wedding photos stuck to our refrigerator with magnets we'd chosen together. Not one. My new job at a Denver architecture firm was everything I'd hoped for. Better salary, reasonable hours, colleagues who respected my work instead of treating me like an inexhaustible resource. I was designing buildings again instead of just managing other people's financial crises. Marcus was thriving too. The construction company had promoted him to project supervisor within his first month, and he came home every day excited about his work instead of stressed about family dynamics. "Your phone's been quiet today," he observed, pulling our wedding cake out of the refrigerator. It had been quiet for 2 weeks now. After blocking 17 different numbers, changing my social media settings, and having a lawyer send a cease and contact letter, my family had finally gotten the message. Or so I thought. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when Marcus called from the living room. "Callie, you need to see this." I found him standing by our front window, holding back the curtain slightly. "Don't look obvious, but there's a car across the street that's been there since I left for my run. Someone's sitting in it." My stomach clenched. "What kind of car?" "Blue Honda Civic. Colorado plates, but it looks like a rental." Jake drove a blue Honda. But Jake was supposed to be in California, finishing his senior year at the high school near my old house. I peeked through the curtain and felt my blood pressure spike. It was definitely Jake, and he was staring directly at our front door. How did he find us? Social media, public records, does it matter? Marcus was right. How Jake had tracked us down was less important than what to do about it. "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone. "Wait." Marcus caught my hand. "Let me talk to him first. He's just a kid, and he came a long way. Maybe he just needs closure." Against my better judgment, I let Marcus walk outside. I watched from the window as he crossed the street and approached Jake's car. They talked for about 5 minutes before Jake drove away. "What did he say?" I asked when Marcus came back inside. "He wanted to apologize. Ryan drove him here, but Jake wanted to talk to you alone. Said your parents have been fighting constantly since you left, and your dad lost his workshop clients because he had to move out of your basement. Your mom's been crying every day. And he's starting to understand why you did what you did. Apparently living with your parents without you there to buffer everything has been educational." I felt a pang of sympathy for Jake, but not enough to regret my decision. "What else?" He asked if there was any way to fix things, if you'd consider talking to them. "What did you tell him?" I told him that bridge was burned, but maybe someday there could be a new one. Different terms, different boundaries. Marcus was probably right. Jake and Ryan were victims of our parents' manipulation too, in their own way. They'd been raised to believe that family meant unlimited access to each other's resources and unlimited forgiveness for bad behavior. Maybe someday, when they were adults living their own lives, we could have some kind of relationship, but not today. Not while they were still living under my parents' roof and dependent on their version of reality. "I'll send him a letter," I decided. "Let him know I don't hate him, but I can't have a relationship with any of you while Mom and Dad are still controlling the narrative. That seems fair." That afternoon, I wrote the most difficult letter of my life. I explained to Jake that I loved him and Ryan, but I couldn't expose myself to further manipulation from our parents. I told him that if he ever wanted to understand my side of the story, he could contact me after he turned 18 and was living independently. I mailed it to his school address and tried to put the whole thing behind me. 3 months later, I got an email from Ryan. "Jake showed me your letter. I think I get it now. Mom and Dad are talking about moving in with Uncle Frank because they can't afford their own place. But they just bought a new entertainment center and Dad's looking at truck catalogs. It doesn't add up. Maybe we can talk when I graduate? Maybe we could. But that was a bridge for the future, not the present. 2 years later, I was in my garden planting tomatoes when Marcus brought me the phone. "It's Jake," he said quietly. "He says it's important." I wiped the dirt off my hands and took the call, my heart racing with possibilities. Good news, bad news, family emergency, another manipulation attempt. With my family, anything was possible. Callie, it's Jake. I know you said to wait until I was 18, but something happened and I thought you should know. He sounded older, more serious than the kid who'd been demanding ski equipment 2 years ago. What happened? Dad had a heart attack. He's okay, but he's in the hospital and Mom's freaking out about medical bills. Again. I felt the familiar tug of guilt and obligation, but it was fainter now, like an old scar that aches when it rains but doesn't really hurt anymore. I'm sorry to hear that. Is he going to be okay? Yeah, doctors say it was mild. But Callie, they've been living with Uncle Frank for 8 months now. His wife is going crazy because they're doing the same thing to Frank's family that they did to you. I wasn't surprised. Leopards and spots, as they say. Mom keeps saying this is all your fault, Jake continued. That if you hadn't been so cruel and selfish, none of this would have happened. But Ryan and I have been talking, and we think maybe you had the right idea. Jake. No, let me finish. We lived with them for 6 months after you left, and it was hell. They fought constantly, blamed each other for losing your house, and made everything everyone else's fault. Ryan moved in with his girlfriend's family just to get away from the drama. I'm staying at school as much as possible. This was what I'd hoped for but never expected. My brother's beginning to see our parents' behavior clearly instead of through the lens of family loyalty. I'm proud of you for recognizing unhealthy patterns, I said carefully. That takes courage. Will you talk to them? Not for them, but for us? Ryan and I miss you, and we're tired of being in the middle of this family war. I looked out at my garden, my peaceful backyard, my life that I'd built from scratch after escaping their chaos. Did I want to invite any of that dysfunction back in? I'll think about it, I said finally. But Jake, you need to understand, if I have any relationship with Mom and Dad, it will be completely different from before. I won't be their financial backup plan or their emotional punching bag. I won't tolerate manipulation or guilt trips. And I won't let them treat Marcus with disrespect. I get it. And honestly, good for you. Someone needed to set boundaries with them years ago. After we hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking about family and forgiveness, and the difference between reconciliation and surrender. Marcus found me there as the sun was setting. So? He asked, settling beside me on the wooden bench he'd built last spring. I'm thinking about it. Limited contact, strict boundaries, maybe holiday cards and occasional phone calls, but only to maintain some connection with Jake and Ryan. And your parents? They're still my parents. I don't have to like them or trust them or support them financially, but I can probably manage to be civil for the sake of my brothers. That's very mature of you. 2 years of therapy will do that. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the Colorado sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Our dog, a rescued golden retriever named Scout, wandered over and flopped down at our feet with a satisfied sigh. This was my life now. Peaceful, predictable, built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities. Marcus and I split everything equally. Bills, chores, decisions, dreams. Nobody kept score because nobody was taking advantage. My parents had taught me what family shouldn't look like. Marcus had shown me what partnership could be. You know what's funny? I said, scratching Scout behind the ears. What? They got exactly what they wanted. I disappeared from their lives. They just didn't expect it to come with consequences. Do you think they've learned anything? I thought about Jake's description of their ongoing financial chaos, their cycle of dependency from one family member to the next, their continued refusal to take responsibility for their own choices. Probably not. But that's not my problem anymore. 6 months later, I sent a brief email to my parents. I told them I was willing to maintain limited contact for Jake and Ryan's sake, but that any relationship would require acknowledgement of past harm and commitment to respectful boundaries going forward. Their response was predictable, a mixture of defensive justifications and tearful manipulations. They were hurt that I could hold a grudge so long. They were disappointed that I'd choose strangers over family. They were confused about why I couldn't just forgive and forget. I didn't engage with the manipulation. Instead, I sent one final message. I'm available for civil conversation when you're ready to take responsibility for your actions. Until then, my contact will be limited to Jake and Ryan. That was 3 months ago. I haven't heard from them since. But Jake and Ryan both have my phone number now, and we text occasionally about normal sibling things, their jobs, their relationships, their plans for college. It's not the close relationship we might have had in a healthier family, but it's something, and something is enough. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about standing up to family manipulation and building the life you deserve. Remember, you can love your family and still protect yourself from their dysfunction. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. What would you have done in Callie's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.